Hey guys, so step 3 for your scrunchie after you have read your directions and watched your video and gathered all your materials is now to iron your fabric. So I have my ironing board right here. I've got my fabric I'm going to place just right on top of the ironing board. I have my iron plugged in. I have it set onto the cotton setting, which is what most of your fabric hoarders are probably going to be made out of, but you do want to adjust the iron to the proper setting according to what material your fabric is made out of. So you do want to iron both sides. You're just going to run your iron kind of quickly over the fabric. You do not want to leave your iron setting in one spot for too long because you do not want to burn your fabric. And you do want to iron both sides of your fabric. So I'm going to finish this last little part of this side. And now I'm going to flip my fabric over and I'm going to iron the other side as well. And I've just got this last little part here. And there you go. Whenever you are done with the iron, make sure you sit it upright so that the hot part is no longer touching the iron or the fabric. And either you can unplug it to turn it off, or you can leave it sitting there in case there's another student that needs to use it. Next, after you iron your fabric, you are going to cut it to the right size. So if you have a fabric hoarder, just like I have, it should measure about 18 inches by about 22 inches. So I have my tape measure here. I'm going to lay it down on this side, and this side is exactly 18 inches. So that's appropriate. I'm going to turn it this side, and this side should be about 22 inches. The package will say 21 inches, but typically a fabric hoarder has this little white spot on it. This is called a selvage, and we're going to cut that off. So I'm going to make sure I measure it properly. Again, it's a little over 22 inches. So I'm going to cut this white part off, and then we should be at the exact length that we need. So I got my fabric scissors, and I'm just going to follow along with this white selvage, and I'm going to cut right up next to it. So after we cut this selvage part off, we don't need this anymore, so you can just toss this in the trash. So we're going to use our tape measure again and measure the length of this side, which perfect. It's about 21.5 inches, which is the perfect size that we need. After you've taken the selvage off, you want to measure this side again, and so mine measures to about 21.5 inches, which is perfect for this length on this side. Then we need 3.5 inches on the other direction. So I'm going to use my fabric pin, and I'm going to use my seam gauge this time just because it's a little bit easier to read close up. I'm going to move my little blue measuring tool, and I'm going to move it to the 3.5 inch spot. I'm going to place that onto my fabric, and I'm going to make a mark with my purple side of my marker at the 3.5 inch mark. So now my fabric, I made this 3.5 inch mark right here, and I'm going to cut that all the way across. So to make it a little bit easier, I am going to fold it. I'm going to fold it just because that makes cutting a little bit faster. So just fold it in half like this. Make sure that you can see where your 3.5 inch mark is located. Make sure that the sides of the edge of your fabric lines up, and right at the 3.5 inch mark is where I'm going to cut it with my scissors. So this fabric you can just set to the side because we don't need it anymore. And now when you open this up, you should have a rectangle that is 21.5 or so inches on this side, which it is, and the other side should be about 3.5 inches, which it is. Hey guys, so after you have cut your fabric into a rectangle, now you need to fold it in half, and you're going to fold it hot dog style with the right side on the inside. So all fabric is going to have a right side and a wrong side. So just as a t-shirt can be right side out and wrong side out, it's the same thing with fabric. So the right side of my fabric is the side that has the lemons on it and the leaves, and you can clearly see the different colors. The wrong side, as you flip it over, you can still see some of the colors, but it's a little bit blurry, and you can see that there's a little bit of white specks into the background color. So that is the wrong side of my fabric. So I'm going to fold this hot dog style. So take my fabric, fold into a hot dog, and I want my right sides on the inside. So when I fold it in half, now all I see is the wrong side. And now I'm going to take this and I'm going to pin this together. So make sure that the edges of your fabric are lined up properly. You're going to hold it together with your fingers. Oh, I'm going to go this way. Hold it together with your fingers, and you want to take your pin and you're going to put it in perpendicular to the edge. So the edge goes this way and the pin is going to go this way. So they're going to be perpendicular. You want the ball part of the pin to be on the outside edge. So the ball part of the pin should not be touching the fabric itself. So I'm going to continue to go all the way down my rectangle, and I'm going to pin this together. You don't need a whole lot of pins. You just need one every few inches or so. Just enough pins to hold the fabric together. So I'm going to hold it, place a pin in this direction, and keep moving downwards. Sometimes you might need to readjust your fold as you go. That's okay. Gotta fix my fold. Oh, I think I dropped a pin. Here it is. So now I've got pins all along my rectangle, and I have my little pink, the little pink ball part is not touching the fabric itself. So after you have folded the fabric in half and pinned it, which what I've done, we're going to iron the fold so that we get a nice crease on it. So I'm just going to set my fabric down, take my iron, and slowly move it on down. It's okay if the iron touches the metal part of the pin, so the metal part, but you don't want the iron to touch the little ball part of the pin because it will melt it. So, slowly and carefully, I'm going to just run my iron down my fabric, down the fold. Again, you don't want your iron to be sat in one spot for too long because you can burn your fabric. So, iron my crease. So now you should have a nice, good, solid fold. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set my iron to the side, and I'm going to take one end of my fabric and I'm going to fold it over about 1/2 inch. So you're going to take out the pin on the end, and I'm just going to put it on my pin magnet. I'm going to take my seam gauge and I've moved my little blue marker over to the 1/2 inch spot. I'm going to place my seam gauge on the end of the fabric and mark it at 1/2 inch. So I'm going to take my fabric marker. Again, I'm going to use the blue side, excuse me, the purple side, and I'm going to mark where 1/2 inch is. So now you can see I made a purple line where the 1/2 inch mark is. From here, I'm going to make a fold on that purple line. So I have folded over my fabric 1/2 inch, and I'm just going to pin this again. after I pin this, I'm now going to iron this crease as well. So take my iron, and I'm just going to place it on this crease and make sure we get a nice set fold. Again, careful not to touch your iron to the ball side of the pin so it doesn't melt it. And there we go. I've got that part folded over. So after we have pinned and ironed our fabric, it is now time to start sewing. So before I actually start sewing, I want to make sure that I'm all set up and ready to go. I'm going to make sure I have a pin magnet sitting next to me, so I have somewhere to put my pins as I pull them out of the fabric. And I'm also going to mark my seam allowance with some masking tape. So you don't have to do this. This is just something that helps me out, and I think it might help you out too. So I'm going to adjust the camera here a little bit so you can see a little bit more up close. I'm going to take my blue masking tape and I'm going to tape it right up next to the presser foot. So my presser foot is down and the tape is going to line up right at the end of the presser foot. So the presser foot on the right side ends here and the tape is right up next to it. So that's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is not the exact same machine as the ones we have at school, but it's the same seam allowance. It's the same idea. So I'm going to start by putting the edge of my fabric up next to my blue masking tape. So as I'm sewing, I want to make sure that I continue to line up the edge of my fabric with the edge of my blue masking tape. That's how you make sure that your seam is going to be straight. So I'm going to take out this first pin, put it on my magnet. I've got my machine threaded and ready to go, black thread, so matching thread. And I'm going to place the presser foot down, and again, making sure that the edge of my fabric has been lined up with the blue masking tape. You always want to start with your needle in the fabric, so I'm going to turn the hand wheel. Make sure you turn it towards you. You're going to put the needle into your fabric, and now you're going to start sewing. So I'm just going to slowly push. So after you've gone in about an inch or so, now you need to backstitch. So I'm going to push my reverse button and backstitch all the way back to the edge, and then I'm going to keep going forward. So I'm just going to keep going straight, keeping the edge of my fabric lined up with the edge of the blue masking tape. I'm going to take the pins out as I go. You do not want to sew over a pin. So slowly keep going down. And I just stop a little bit whenever I get close to a pin so I can take it out. Again, I'm watching that the edge of my fabric lines up with the blue masking tape. And I'm just going to sew all the way down. Again, you don't want to push or pull your fabric, you just kind of want to guide it and let the sewing machine do its job. So now I'm at the end where I folded my fabric over. So you want to be careful as you do this, make sure you don't unfold the fabric. And you're going to backstitch at this end as well. So when you get to the edge, you're going to hold down the reverse button, and you're going to go back forwards, and you're just going to keep letting your machine go. Now I'm finished sewing. I'm going to pull out the threads and clip it off. So now I have sewed my edges together, and I'm just going to clip off the extra threads at the end. And at this point, if you have any loose threads on the edge of the fabric, just kind of like I would have these little frayed parts, I'm just going to cut those off too. Don't cut the fabric itself, but just cut off any of the little excess frayed parts. And I've got some of these. I'm going to keep going and cutting down the excess threads. So the next thing we need to do is we need to turn this right side out. So what you're going to need is just a safety pin. I got my safety pin. Excuse me. You want to start with the side that's folded over, and I'm just going to take my safety pin and I'm going to pin it on one side of the fabric. So I got my safety pin, and again, it's just hooked to one side of the fabric here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the safety pin all the way through, and that's going to turn my fabric right side out. So it's a little bit tricky, but you're just going to shove your safety pin all the way through. You're going to kind of gather your fabric, and then you want to pull it across, pull it on down. So gather your fabric and pull it down. Gather and pull. Gather. And then pull it down a little bit. And go all the way through. So now your safety pin comes out the other side, and you're just going to pull the fabric all the way on through. And now you have your fabric turned right side out. After we have turned our fabric right side out, we need to iron it just to make it look a little bit nicer. So the seam that I just made, right here, and you want the seam to be where you fold the fabric. So same thing on this end, this is where I just sewed. So I'm going to fold it, and this is what I need to iron. So I got my iron hot. I'm going to just move my iron on down. Again, you want to be careful to not let the iron sit in one spot for too long so that you don't burn the fabric. And you're just going to go all the way down and just kind of adjust the fabric as you move the iron down. So now I've got it all ironed. So Bagel and I are going to show you how to cut your elastic for your scrunchie. So here's just the elastic in the package, a 1/4 of an inch soft elastic. I will provide this for you. So I'm just going to open it up, maybe. Bagel is very interested in what we're doing. I'm going to get my elastic out. I'm just going to take this off. So you only want to cut the elastic to where there's enough that fits around your wrist. So I'm just going to kind of wrap it around my wrist like this. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but I'm going to wrap it around my wrist like this, and you want to cut it about to the size of your wrist. So this, you can let other people use that. All you need is this little part right here. So now it's time to put our elastic into our fabric. So for this, you're going to need, obviously, your fabric, your elastic, and then 2 safety pins. So I'm going to take one of the safety pins, and I'm just going to put it into one end of the elastic. I'm just going to close it just like this. So now you're going to need to locate the end of the fabric that has been folded in. So the one part of the fabric that we folded under 1/2 inch, which is this side. And this, now I'm going to take my safety pin and I'm going to pull it through my fabric just enough to where the end of my elastic is now sticking out just a little bit. So my safety pin is right here where this finger is, and then here's the other end of the elastic. I'm going to take my other safety pin and I'm going to poke it into this end of the elastic. I'm also going to poke it into one side of the fabric. So just like this. So the safety pin has pinned the elastic and the fabric together. And we did this so that whenever we're pulling this end of the elastic through, we don't pull the whole thing through. So we're going to take the safety pin that's right here and we're going to pull it all the way to the other end. And now when you start to see your scrunchie shape, so pull the safety pin all the way through. So you've got this end of the elastic. Now you can take the safety pin out that has safety pin, the fabric, and this elastic together. So you should be able to, now you should be able to see both ends of the elastic pulled through the fabric. So I'm going to take this safety pin and now I'm going to pin both of these ends of the elastic together. So before we close the elastic, we want to make sure that it's not turned inside our scrunchie. So I'm just going to run my hand down and just make sure that my elastic is straight. Make sure it's not turned because that can be kind of uncomfortable when you wear it. And there we go. So now that we have our elastic pulled through our fabric, we need to connect the two ends of the elastic together. So there are two ways you can do this. I'm going to show you both, and it's totally up to you which one you want to do. One, the easiest way probably, is to just tie the elastic together. So as best as you can, just pull the elastic and make a little knot, just like this. So that's one way. So the second way to close your elastic is to sew the two ends together. So I got my elastic pulled through my fabric, and you want to make sure you have quite a bit of slack on both ends. So you want to overlap it about 1.5 inches or 2 inches, and you're going to use safety pins to pin the ends together. So I've got these two ends, these two sides overlapped, and I'm going to take a safety pin and pin these two ends together. So I got these two ends safety pin together, and I'm going to take my other safety pin and pin these two ends together. Oh, it can be kind of tricky because the elastic wants to move around on you. So now I need to sew it. I'm going to move my camera a little bit so you can see more up close to what I'm doing. So I have my two ends safety pin together, and I'm going to push the ends of the safety pin both to the edge of the elastic. So just like this. So I'm going to sew right in between my safety pins. I'm going to sew right in the middle of them. So as I put my fabric, or excuse me, put my elastic down into my machine, I want to make sure that my needle is in the middle of my elastic. It can be kind of tricky. Again, the elastic wants to move quite a bit, but I'm going to hold both safety pins. I'm going to drop my presser foot. Again, make any adjustments with my elastic if I need to. And now I'm going to drop my needle, so move my hand wheel toward me. And I'm going to go back and forth quite a few times just to make sure my elastic has been secured. So, forward. Forward. And backward. And forward. And backward. So now I'm going to pull the extra thread, and now you can see that my elastic has been sewn together. It's a little bit messy, but that's totally okay. Now I can take the safety pins out, and I'm going to trim any excess thread that I have. So I've got these long threads here. I'm just going to cut these off because we don't need them anymore. And now my elastic is sewn together. So now that we have closed our elastic, we want to now close the ends of our fabric. So first we need to take the closure of our elastic and we want to move it kind of inside our fabric. So we kind of just want to hide it right now. So I'm just going to shove my elastic into the fabric and kind of move my fabric over. So either if you sewed it or if you put a knot into it, either one, you do want to kind of hide it in the fabric. So I can feel that this right here is where I sewed the elastic together. Now when you look at the elastic, you can just see one piece of it. Now we're going to tuck in one end of our fabric into the other. So this is the end that we folded over a 1/2 inch and ironed. So this has a nice straight end to it. And this end is frayed a little bit because this is just like that raw edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to tuck in this raw edge into our folded end. So I'm just going to use my thumb and just kind of tuck it into the other end of the fabric. You just need to tuck it in about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. You just want to hide that frayed end into the finished edge. So when we do this, we want to make sure that our seams match up. So the seam on this side matches the seam on this side. So just like it does. And I'm just going to place one pin into the end of this. So take one pin and I'm going to put it into the bottom and out just like this to hold it together. And so now all I need to do is sew a line right down here just to close these two ends of the fabric together. We are at the last step of our scrunchie. So in the previous step, we tucked one end of the fabric into the other end, and we wanted to make sure that our seams matched up, which they do, and then we placed a pin into the bottom of the fabric. Now all we're going to do is sew a line up and down just to sew the two ends of the fabric together. So I'm going to put this edge of my fabric up against the edge of my presser foot. That makes a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to place the edge of my fabric at the edge of my presser foot. So now I'm going to lower my presser foot down. I'm going to move my needle into the fabric itself. And I'm just going to sew up and down and backstitch at the beginning and the end. So straight, reverse, straight again, and now I'm going to take my pin out and kind of hold the ends of the scrunchie. I'm going to kind of pull them tight like this just to make sure that this final piece of fabric gets sewn correctly. So I'm going to go forward all the way through and then I'm going to backstitch. So I've gone forwards. Now I'm going to back, and I'm going to go forwards all the way to the end. So now I'm going to pull my scrunchie out, cut these threads off, and I'm going to cut these long threads here that are left. I'm just going to cut these off. Get rid of those. Another end, and here's one more end. And I'm going to kind of adjust my fabric a little bit to where it's all evenly scrunched up. And here we go. Here is your final scrunchie.